The air on Earth felt thick, oppressive, like a storm had just passed, leaving behind a smothering humidity that clung to every surface. Yet, in the command center of the United Earth Forces, there was no comfort to be found. The massive screen at the front of the room flickered, showing a grim image, a dusty arena, high walls surrounding it, and hundreds of Zarnak Warlord soldiers standing in a circle. Their eyes glowed with malice. In the center, bound and kneeling on the sand, was Lieutenant Johnny Hayes. Alicia Drake stared at the screen, her jaw clenched tight, her hands resting at her sides as though physically restraining her from reaching out. It was supposed to be a routine mission. A capture. A negotiation. But it had gone wrong, horribly wrong. Johnny, a trusted friend and ally, had been taken. The Zarnak had executed him publicly as part of their twisted sport. Why the hell did they do it? Alicia whispered to herself, her voice tight with disbelief. Her heart raced, though her expression remained unreadable. The Earth's generals, sitting nearby, exchanged glances, each one visibly disturbed by the broadcast, but none spoke. The words had already been spoken when the order had come down: Johnny was expendable. The mission had failed, and now they had to pay the price. The camera zoomed in on Johnny's face, his expression a mixture of defiance and acceptance. Alicia felt a cold knot form in her stomach. She knew Johnny. His strength, his resolve. He wouldn't bow. Not for them, not for anyone. The Zarnak warlord who stood in front of him, a hulking figure with the faintly shimmering skin of his kind, raised a blood-stained blade. Alicia could barely breathe as the blade descended, cutting off Johnny's last breath in a flash. Silence filled the command center. The air felt thin. The generals exchanged sharp glances, but none dared speak. Alicia was frozen, her gaze fixed on the screen. She wasn't sure how long it had been since the execution, but the room felt colder now, darker. You know what this means? General Stroud's voice cut through the silence, deep and steady. The Zarnak want war. They've made a statement. Alicia didn't look at him. No. They've made a mistake, she said, her voice low but unmistakably sharp. The cold fury rising in her chest began to settle in her bones, a heat that would not burn out. Johnny had been one of their best. He had been hers to protect, and she had failed. This wouldn't stand. Stroud stood up, his heavy boots clinking on the floor as he approached Alicia. You're not thinking clearly. You can't. I can't. She interrupted him, her eyes now turning to meet his, steel in her gaze. And I will. The room went quiet again. Alicia was already moving toward the door before anyone had time to process her words. Stroud stepped forward, but she cut him off with a glance. We're going to Xylaris. We're going to make them regret this. Alicia's team had been assembled before she even left the briefing room. It wasn't a large team, just a handful of highly trained specialists, each one handpicked for their expertise and ability to execute missions without hesitation. They trained together countless times, fought together, and survived the worst that space had to offer. Today, they would become humanity's wrath. The military-grade dropship hummed beneath Alicia's boots as it prepared to break through the atmosphere. In the quiet that hung between them, Alicia let the cold silence consume her. There were no words. No pep talks. No promises. Johnny was dead. But this wasn't over. You know the plan, Alicia said, her voice barely audible over the low rumble of the engines. We land on the outskirts, infiltrate the arena, and get Johnny's body back. Alive or dead, we're bringing him home. The team nodded, but the tension in the air was thick. None of them were strangers to missions gone sideways, but this was different. The Zarnak weren't just any enemy. They were monsters. The dropship's hull rattled as they entered the atmosphere, and the red lights in the cabin flickered briefly. The countdown began. 5 minutes. The pilot's voice crackled over the comms. Alicia sat back in her seat, her hands on her lap, staring out at the moonlit landscape of Xylaris. The barren land stretched out beneath them like a patchwork of dust and ruin. They'd seen it before in reports, but seeing it in person, the sheer vastness of the alien world, took on a different, sharper edge. The Zarnak had turned it into their battleground. The thought of it made Alicia's teeth grind. "Any word on the prisoners?" Alicia asked, her voice steady. "None yet," replied Tech Sergeant Kane, his voice smooth but tinged with concern. "The arena broadcasts are in full swing. We'll have to time this right." "We'll do more than time it," Alicia said, her gaze hardening. "We'll make it a message." As the ship descended, her thoughts turned back to Johnny, his face before the end, his defiant eyes. They had all seen it. They had all felt it. Johnny had given his life so they could be here today. And Alicia would see that his sacrifice wasn't in vain. The dropship's engines cut as they touched down, the soft thud of landing the only sound in the stillness. Alicia took a deep breath, her gloved hand tightening on the release handle. The hatch opened, and the dry desert wind hit her in the face, hot and arid, carrying the stench of death and dust. "Stay close," Alicia instructed her team. "We move fast, we move silent. We find Johnny, get the hell out, and make them pay." With their weapons ready, they moved out in tactical formation, each step calculated. The moonlight reflected off the sand, casting long shadows across the barren landscape. Ahead of them, the silhouette of the gladiatorial arena loomed, its massive structure a testament to the Zarnak's cruelty. There, in the center, under the harsh gaze of the Warlords, was where they would make their stand. But first, they needed to get inside. Alicia's eyes never wavered from the path ahead, her thoughts locked in on one thing and one thing only: justice for Johnny. She couldn't afford to be distracted, couldn't let herself feel the rage burning through her. Not yet. But soon. Soon, there would be no more restraint. And the Zarnak would learn that humanity was not to be trifled with. The arid landscape of Xylaris stretched endlessly before them, the moonlight casting long shadows across the desert. The arena, with its looming walls and towering spires, seemed a permanent fixture against the barren backdrop. Alicia Drake stood at the edge of the dropship's landing zone, surveying the terrain. The weight of the mission, the loss of Johnny, settled heavily on her shoulders, but she didn't let it show. Not here. Not now. "Stay sharp." Alicia's voice cut through the murmurs of her team, each member double-checking their gear. "We'll split into two groups once we're inside the perimeter. Kane, you and Reeve take the left flank. Dorian, Ellis, you're with me. We move fast, we move quiet." Tech Sergeant Kane, a tall man with a military edge, nodded. His face was hidden behind a high-tech visor, but Alicia could see the familiar tension in his shoulders. He wasn't one to show his nerves, but he wasn't fooling anyone. "Copy that," Kane said, his voice low. "Let's make it quick. Don't want to be around when the Zarnak start looking for us." Alicia didn't reply. Instead, she turned in motion for the team to follow as they began moving toward the darkened outline of the arena. Their boots crunched in the sand, muffled by the sound-dampening material of their tactical suits. The silence felt unnatural, almost oppressive. There were no birds, no insects. Just the wind. And the faint hum of the Zarnak's electronic infrastructure in the distance. The first hurdle came quickly. As Alicia's team neared the outer wall of the arena, a Zarnak patrol appeared from the shadows, moving in a tight formation. Their reptilian features gleamed under the dim light, and their heavy armor made them appear almost indestructible. Alicia held her breath, motioning for her team to stop. "Kane, how long until they pass?" Alicia whispered into the comms. 5 seconds, Kane's low reply. Alicia's heart beat faster. There was no room for error. If they were spotted, the mission would be compromised. "Wait for it, wait!" The patrol passed, their heavy steps reverberating through the ground. The sound faded, and Alicia exhaled slowly. She signaled for her team to move. They crept forward, staying low against the sand. "Stay tight," Alicia ordered. "We're almost in." They approached a hidden entrance, barely a crack in the wall, well concealed from the larger patrolling forces. Alicia motioned to Dorian, the quiet, sharp-eyed sniper, to cover the entrance. Dorian didn't hesitate. He took his position on a raised rock outcropping and set up his weapon, scanning the area with a level of precision that always impressed Alicia. "All clear." Dorian's voice crackled through the comms. "Go ahead." Alicia pushed through the entrance first, the cold, musty air of the arena's tunnels wrapping around her like a blanket. The inside was dim, with only flickers of light from overhead vents illuminating the narrow, winding corridor. They were inside now, but the real challenge was just beginning. The arena was notorious for its advanced security systems. Every corner, every door, was guarded by both Zarnak and automated defenses. "Kane, Reeve," Alicia said. "You're up. Get to the control room. Dorian, Ellis, with me. We're going for the cells." The team split into their respective groups, moving quickly through the corridors. The atmosphere inside the arena was suffocating. The walls seemed to pulse with the energy of unseen surveillance systems. Alicia's mind raced. She could almost feel the Zarnak watching, waiting for any mistake. They reached the holding cells without encountering resistance, but the sight that awaited them was worse than any of them had anticipated. The cells were filled with humans, all shackled, beaten, and barely conscious. The air smelled of sweat, blood, and fear. Alicia's heart clenched at the sight of Johnny's comrades, soldiers she had once trained with. "We're not leaving without them," Alicia said, her voice firm as steel. "Get them out." Ellis moved toward one of the cells, his face grim. "These guys don't look like they've got much fight left in them." "They'll fight when we give them a reason," Alicia replied, pulling out a small, high-frequency disruptor. She aimed it at the locking mechanism on the first cell. The metal gave way with a soft hiss. "Let's get them on their feet." Alicia stepped into the cell and helped a man, a former lieutenant she recognized from a mission back home, to his feet. He was weak, shaking, but when his eyes met hers, something flickered in his gaze. Hope. He might not have much left, but that flicker was enough. "Thank you," the man rasped, his voice rough. "You're from Earth?" "Yes," Alicia answered, her voice low but resolute. "We're getting you out of here." As the team moved through the cells, unlocking doors and helping the prisoners to their feet, Alicia felt a surge of urgency. They had to leave before the Zarnak realized they were there. But the prisoners weren't the only thing on Alicia's mind. Every minute that passed, she could almost hear Johnny's voice in her head, urging her to stay focused. To complete the mission. To make it count. "How many more?" Alicia asked as she helped a woman to her feet, her arms trembling from the effort. "3 more cells," Ellis replied. "Then we're out." "Not yet," Alicia said. "We're taking them all." As the last of the prisoners were freed, Alicia motioned for her team to fall back. They retraced their steps, moving swiftly and silently through the corridors, their progress slowed only by the injured prisoners who needed assistance. Alicia's instincts screamed that something was off, but she couldn't place it. The air felt too still. Too quiet. Then it happened. "Trap!" Kane's voice came through the comms, urgent and sharp. "They're coming. The Zarnak are on their way!" Alicia cursed under her breath. "Move it!" The team broke into a sprint, the sound of pursuit growing louder as they raced through the darkened corridors. They were moments away from the exit when the ground shook beneath them, and the whine of the Zarnak's security system activated. The arena, it seemed, was no longer going to let them leave. "Keep moving!" Alicia shouted, her pulse pounding in her ears. "We're not dying here!" Alicia led her team through the final stretch toward the exit, but the Zarnak weren't far behind. The storm was coming. And for once, Alicia knew there was no turning back. The halls of the Zarnak arena twisted around them, disorienting in their complexity. Alicia led the way, her every step measured, her senses alert to every noise, every flicker of movement. The prisoners they had freed were struggling to keep up, their bodies weakened by weeks, maybe months, of torture. Yet they moved as one, urged forward by the quiet urgency in Alicia's voice. "We're close. Just hold it together," Alicia muttered, scanning the hall ahead. A faint mechanical hum filled the air, reverberating through the cold, metal walls. The Zarnak security systems were online now, and that could only mean one thing: They were about to face something far worse than simple patrols. Dorian, still perched on the ledge above them, his sniper rifle trained on the shadows, murmured into his comms. "Movement up ahead, boss. 2 guards. Looks like they're waiting for us." "Shit," Alicia cursed under her breath, glancing back at her team. They had no choice now but to confront the Zarnak. With the prisoners in tow, they couldn't afford to sneak past them. They had to fight their way out. "Kane, Reeve," Alicia said, her voice calm but firm. "Take the left side. Dorian, you're with me. Ellis, stay with the prisoners and get them into cover." Her gaze met the eyes of the injured man from the cell. "Get them to the extraction point. Now." Ellis nodded, moving quickly to shepherd the survivors into a side corridor. The others, silent but determined, fanned out, positioning themselves along the walls, ready for what was to come. Alicia took a deep breath, mentally preparing herself for the chaos ahead. She was no stranger to combat, but this felt different. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice, about ensuring Johnny's death wasn't forgotten, that humanity's resolve wasn't broken by these creatures. "On my mark," she said, her voice steady. 3, 2, 1, go. With a sudden rush of movement, the team erupted from their positions. Alicia's rifle was in her hands before the guards had time to react. She fired 2 quick shots, each one striking its target with deadly precision. The Zarnak soldiers crumpled to the floor without a sound, their bulky bodies falling awkwardly. But they had made noise. Enough to draw attention. Alicia could hear the distant hum of alarms now, followed by the sharp, metallic clang of doors opening further down the hall. "Shit, here they come!" Kane's voice rang out, a burst of gunfire filling the silence that followed. "We've got this," Alicia said, her voice hard. "Keep them off the prisoners. Move!" The corridor ahead was filled with a blinding flash of light as the Zarnak reinforcements emerged from the shadows, their eyes glowing with malice. Alicia's team took cover, returning fire with calculated efficiency, each shot finding its mark. But they weren't just fighting soldiers. They were fighting an empire. And that empire had weapons, technology, and an army of endless ferocity. Dorian picked off 2 more soldiers from his elevated position, but the rest of the Zarnak soldiers were closing in fast. Alicia's heart raced. The team's ammunition was limited, and they couldn't afford a prolonged fight. She needed to think fast. She needed a way out. "Move to the next door!" Alicia shouted. "We need to get to the maintenance shaft, now!" The team moved in tandem, each step coordinated, moving through the chaos with the precision that came from years of training. The Zarnak were relentless, but Alicia's team had one advantage: they were human. Resourceful. Unpredictable. As they reached the maintenance door, Alicia punched in the override code she'd memorized from the security blueprint. The door slid open with a metallic hiss. The team rushed inside, and Alicia immediately hit the emergency lock, sealing the door behind them. The sounds of the Zarnak pounding against the metal surface were deafening. "Go, go, go!" Alicia ordered, her pulse racing. The maintenance shaft was narrow, the air thick with the smell of dust and rust, but it was their only chance. They had to move quickly. The shaft stretched out before them, a dark, claustrophobic tunnel that led toward the lower levels of the arena. Alicia could hear the panicked breath of the prisoners behind her, but she didn't dare turn to look. Not yet. Not while the Zarnak were so close. "How long until we hit the extraction point?" Dorian's voice echoed from behind her, his tone clipped but controlled. 5 minutes, Alicia said, gritting her teeth. "Less if we don't waste any time." The shaft was a maze of twists and turns, each one feeling like an eternity. The only light came from their headlamps, casting eerie shadows on the walls as they moved. Sweat trickled down Alicia's forehead, but she couldn't afford to stop. She couldn't afford to slow down. Suddenly, a roar echoed from behind them, the unmistakable sound of a Zarnak soldier caught in the shaft. Alicia whirled around, raising her weapon. But before she could fire, Dorian was already there, taking out the threat with a single, precise shot. The soldier's body crumpled, but the sound had already alerted others. "They're on us!" Kane shouted from the front. "We're not gonna make it to the extraction like this!" Alicia's mind raced. They needed a diversion. And fast. "Ellis, you've got the explosives!" Alicia barked. "Set the charge. We need it now." Ellis, the quiet explosives expert, quickly took out the small set of charges they had carried with them. He worked fast, his hands steady as he planted them at key junctions along the maintenance shaft. The rest of the team covered him, firing at the advancing Zarnak. "Done!" Ellis yelled, slinging the detonator into his hand. "Ready when you are!" "On my mark, blow it!" Alicia ordered, her voice firm. "Now!" With the press of a button, the charges detonated in rapid succession, sending shockwaves through the arena. The explosion echoed through the shaft, shaking the very walls. The Zarnak were thrown off balance, their pursuit halted momentarily by the blast. Alicia didn't wait. She motioned for her team to move, pushing forward through the now cleared tunnel. But the fight wasn't over. Not yet. They had to make it out alive. And that was never guaranteed. The maintenance shaft ended in a large, open hangar bay, filled with abandoned transport ships. Alicia's heart raced as she scanned the area. The extraction point was in sight. But so were the Zarnak. "They're right behind us!" Kane shouted. Alicia gritted her teeth. There was no time for hesitation. "Move to the transports! Now!" The team sprinted toward the closest ship, their legs burning with the effort. Alicia didn't look back, didn't dare to wonder if they were too late. She couldn't afford to think about failure. As they reached the transport ship, the hum of its engines came to life. The hatch opened, and Alicia rushed inside, signaling the prisoners to follow. Dorian and Ellis were right behind her, securing the doors. "Go now!" Alicia shouted at the pilot. The ship roared to life, lifting off just as the first wave of Zarnak soldiers arrived, too late to stop them. Alicia looked out the viewports as the arena grew smaller, swallowed by the dust storm that seemed to follow them. Her heart was still pounding, but a small, grim smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. Johnny had been avenged. But the war was far from over. The hum of the transport ship was a constant, soothing sound, a reminder that they were no longer on the ground. Alicia Drake sat in the cockpit, staring out the viewports, watching the dark expanse of space stretch before her. The mission was complete, but the weight of what they'd accomplished, what they had yet to accomplish, hung heavily on her shoulders. The prisoners, exhausted and broken, were scattered throughout the cabin, too tired to speak. Alicia's mind drifted back to the horrors they'd witnessed on Xylaris. Johnny's execution had been brutal, but the real story had been in the aftermath. The people they'd rescued, the stories of survival in the face of the Zarnak's cruelty. "Captain!" Dorian's voice pulled her from her thoughts. He stood in the doorway of the cockpit, his face unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that made Alicia sit up straighter. "We've got incoming. Zarnak fleet. It's massive." Alicia's pulse quickened, her fingers tightening on the ship's controls. She hadn't expected the Zarnak to just roll over. But this? A full fleet? She should have known. This was their retaliation for everything they'd done. For Johnny's death. For every prisoner they'd freed. They would burn the galaxy to the ground if it meant quelling humanity's defiance. "How much time do we have?" Alicia's voice was steady, betraying none of the tension building inside her. 10 minutes, Dorian said, his tone grim. "Maybe less." Alicia's gaze flicked to the tactical readout. There was no way they'd make it to Earth in time to warn them, not with that kind of force closing in. "Set a course for the nearest UF command post," she ordered, the words falling from her lips without hesitation. "We can't let them launch this assault without a fight." Dorian nodded, already inputting the coordinates. Alicia stood, moving past him to the main cabin. The survivors had begun to stir, their faces pale but alert, as though they too could sense the shift in the air. "We have a problem," Alicia said, her voice carrying through the cabin. "Zarnak fleet is inbound. I don't know how many ships, But we don't have the firepower to take them head on. Kane, who had been silently working on a console, turned to face her. So we run. We don't have time to run, Alicia replied, her tone harsh. We fight. We do what we do best. She looked around the room, meeting each of their eyes. They had all come through hell together, and now they faced their toughest test. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about sending a message that humanity wouldn't cower in the face of the Zarnak. That Earth's Reapers were unstoppable. Dorian entered the cabin, his face tight with focus. I've got an idea. If we can hack into the Zarnak's communications grid, we might be able to send a signal to their fleet's command center. We can disrupt their coordination long enough to give us a fighting chance. Alicia considered it for a moment, then nodded. Do it. But make it quick. We don't have the luxury of time. The ship's alarms blared suddenly, jolting everyone into action. The Zarnak fleet was closer now, their presence a looming threat on every screen. Here they come, Ellis said, his voice low. They're opening fire. Alicia gritted her teeth as the first blast shook the ship, throwing everyone off balance. The console in front of her flickered, showing the incoming projectiles, each one a deadly threat. They had no shields, no advanced weaponry. But they had speed, and they had something even more dangerous, the element of surprise. Reeve, Alicia called, turning to the tactical officer. Prepare the evasive maneuvers. Get us out of here. Already on it, Reeve replied, his hands moving over the controls with practiced ease. The ship jerked as they sped forward, narrowly avoiding a direct hit. The shockwave from the near miss rattled the hull, but the ship held together. Alicia's eyes flicked to the main view screen. The Zarnak ships were massive, towering behemoths with sharp, angular designs that made them look like predators in space. Their weapons glowed ominously, preparing for another round of fire. How's that hack coming, Dorian? Alicia asked, her voice strained. Almost there, Dorian replied, his fingers a blur on the console. I breached their outer firewalls. Just a few more seconds. Seconds they didn't have. The Zarnak opened fire again, and this time, the ship rocked violently. The lights flickered, and the emergency alarms blared louder than before. Alicia could hear the sound of tearing metal. She glanced over her shoulder at the prisoners, their faces pale but resolute. Keep them together, Alicia barked at Ellis. Stay in the aft section, and don't leave anyone behind. Ellis nodded, ushering the survivors further back into the ship. Alicia's heart thundered in her chest as she turned back to the viewports. The Zarnak weren't going to let them go. Not without a fight. Then, Dorian's voice cut through the chaos. I've got it. Disrupting their communications grid now. The screen flickered again, and for a brief moment, the Zarnak ships seemed to hesitate, as though caught off guard. But then, a larger explosion erupted from the Zarnak flagship. A chain reaction rippled through their fleet as the coordination fell apart. Ship after ship began to veer off course, their weapons firing wildly into space. That's our window! Alicia shouted. Reeve, hit them with everything we've got! Reeve's hands flew over the controls, and for the first time in the mission, Alicia felt a surge of hope. The ship shuddered again as its weapons systems flared to life. Energy blasts streaked across the void, striking one of the Zarnak ships directly. The explosion lit up the dark expanse of space like a dying star. We're taking them down! Alicia yelled, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Keep firing! The ship surged forward, weaving between the disarrayed Zarnak fleet. They weren't out of danger yet, but for the first time, they were giving as good as they were getting. The Zarnak were retreating, their ships falling apart under the onslaught. One more push! Alicia shouted. Give them everything we've got! The ship's main cannons flared, releasing a final barrage of fire that tore through the Zarnak flagship. The massive vessel exploded, taking a portion of the fleet with it. The remaining ships scattered, disorganized, no longer a threat. The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Alicia exhaled, her hands shaking as she released the grip on the controls. They had done it. They had taken down the Zarnak fleet. But at what cost? Alicia turned to her crew, her voice steady but filled with a new, hard resolve. We've won this round. But this war, it's just beginning. The ship slowed as they made their way toward the extraction point. The Zarnak had learned something today. Humanity was no longer the weak, helpless species they thought they could crush. Earth's Reapers had unleashed a fury that they would never forget. As the ship drifted toward safety, Alicia's mind turned toward the future. The battle was over. But the war? The war was only beginning.